Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome back to the Loco Builder. First of all, thank you very much to everyone who took the time out just to like the last video. I know it's a bit of a naff thing to sort of ask people to do, but it really does help because it means the video is more visible on YouTube and hopefully more people can find it. So that's fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I think I wanted double figures and we actually got 18 at the last count as well. So that's fantastic. We've also got new subscribers. We're over 130 on the new subscribers. So what's that? 130 people is probably enough to fill, I don't know, like 2 rooms in a house maybe? Don't know what's that approximates to. But anyway, that 132 people is quite good for this little channel. And I'm really pleased with the growth that we've had recently. So very warm welcome. Today we're going to be looking at painting and specifically using an airbrush. I know that's one of the things that people sort of struggle with within the hobby. It's kind of like soldering and painting with an airbrush that seem to be the two black arts. But I'm going to show you today that it's not the case, and actually it's quite easy to do. Before we get into it then, we just need to do a bit of preparation on our model. Now, a lot of the techniques that I'm going to use today are applicable to kit-built models and also ready-to-run models as well. So if you're going to repaint a ready-to-run model, a lot of this stuff applies to that as well. And I like to, with my kit locomotives anyway, really important to clean them off properly beforehand, and that's what these products here are for. For a start, it's a really good idea just to use a little toothbrush and just scrub around, and I use this flash with bleach stuff here to begin with. Spray it all on the model, scrub it all off. If any little bits that you've soldered on come off, then you know that you've done a rubbish job at soldering and you can put them back on. So I'd advise you just do that in a little bowl in the sink just to make sure that if you do lose any bits, they are caught and not lost. Rinse it off with sort of lukewarm water. You don't want to go too hot on the water because otherwise if you've got any white metal bits that are soldered on, remember that melts at 70 degrees, the solder. So it could start softening at maybe 50. So I would use lukewarm water, no need to go any hotter than that. Rinse it all off, then once that's done, I use some Sillet Bang. Really good stuff because it just seems to cut through all the grease and muck that might be on the model, and it leaves the brass looking very nice and shiny. It tarnishes the solder goes kind of black, but you know it's nice and clean. And again, I go over that with the toothbrush, scrubbing it all off, and then once more rinse off in lukewarm water. The final stage then that I do is just a squirt of washing up liquid on there. Again, scrub it all in, work it all nicely, rinse off, and then make sure it's really thoroughly rinsed. I'll give it 2 or 3 rinses, scrub it again. What you want to do is then leave the model, don't really touch it, try and touch it very carefully by maybe the foot plate, and then put it somewhere out of the way to dry for about 24 hours. Airing cupboard will be fine. Put a little box over the top of it so the dust doesn't fall on it, because dust is our enemy. And then once it's dry, you don't really want to be handling the model, so you probably want to get some cotton gloves. And I know that sounds a bit extreme, but paint absolutely hates grease, and if you've got any grease on your hands, you're liable to get fingerprints on the model when it's painted. So once you've got your perfectly clean model that, remember, we're not going to handle and get grease on, we now need to prime it, and the priming stage is really important. Now for a plastic model, you can use this stuff, which is just a normal primer. I get mine from Halfords, but Tamiya do primer as well. It's formulated with plastic. This one's a white one. Doesn't really matter, white or grey, whatever you want to use. There are other colours there, but the Halfords stuff is pretty good, I have to be honest with you. However, if you're painting a white metal model or particularly brass, you need a etch primer. An etch primer, what that does, when you spray it on, it's kind of like a chemical reaction with the brass, and it digs into the surface of the brass. Brass is very smooth and paint doesn't like to adhere to it, so you need that etch primer chemical reaction with the surface of the metal to ensure a really nice, good key for your paint in future, because if you don't use a primer, the paint will tend to chip off, and that's no good. We don't want that. So priming it is very essential. Now, with the aerosols, you just need to practice. You want to lay on a nice even coat, not too thick. You don't want to be obliterating detail. If I was going to suggest anything to you, you practice first. If you haven't used aerosols, just practice first and practice on scrap models or something like that, something you don't need, to make sure that you're getting the paint flow right, because you need to ensure that you're not flooding it with paint. That's as bad as not covering it enough. If anything, go light to begin with and then build it up. I haven't shown you that process because I do it out in the corridor here. It's pretty messy, and to be honest with you, it's just one of those things you've just got to practice. It's just laying on a nice smooth coat of paint, and then hopefully once you've done that, you'll end up with something that looks like this. As you can see there, it's lovely and smooth. It's a nice stable paint coat, and it's going to be the basis of our finished model, so we need to ensure that it is nice and smooth, and you can see there that it is, and it's also very tough as well, so that's ideal as a primed coat. Now let's move on and have a look at the setup that I use for my airbrushing. Okay then, so my airbrushing setup is fairly straightforward, it's fairly basic. I do appreciate, obviously, if you're going to start airbrushing, you do need some kit, and there are various places where you can get some kit. For example, Expo has relatively cheap airbrushes and compressors. There are Badger as well, they do quite cheap airbrushes. I personally get my airbrush stuff from everythingairbrush.com, and I use this, which is a Harder and Steenbeck Evolution 2-in-1 airbrush. Now, I'm not going to run through all the technicals of what airbrushes you can use and all that sort of stuff. That's not what this video is about. If you want a technical based video, when I look at airbrushes, nozzle sizes and all that kind of thing, we can do that. Just let me know and we'll do that at some point in the future. So airbrush, and I also use this chap here, which is my compressor and air reservoir. I've had this for quite a while. One thing I would suggest is, if you're doing airbrushing, don't get the air cans because they're very, very expensive. They're unreliable, they don't work. If you're thinking about doing airbrushing, just get a compressor. I think you can probably pick them up without the reservoir, starting at about 50 or 60 quid for a semi-decent one. So have a look and get that for that as well. So quite important to have a decent air supply for your airbrushing. Now, the other thing that people have a problem with is thinning the paint. And I've been doing this probably for about 20 years now. I couldn't tell you how I precisely thin the paint. I'm able to do it now by eye and by feel. To offer you a guide as a beginner as to how to thin the paint, what you want to achieve is something that's the consistency of semi-skimmed milk. So, how do we achieve that? Well, the best thing to do is get your little paint jar that you're going to use, so little paint jar like that, and fill it halfway with some semi-skimmed milk. Then give it a shake. The thickness of the viscosity of the liquid will make a different sound based on how thick it is or thin. And so you can hear what skimmed milk sounds like. Then what you do is get a same size paint cup or same size jar, fill it with a little bit of paint, and then give it a shake. And you'll notice that because it's purely paint, it will have a thicker sound. Then all you need to do is keep on adding thinner until the paint sounds the same as the milk when you shake them, and that way you'll get an approximation of the right thickness and consistency of paint that you need to put through the airbrush. Over time you'll practice it and you'll find out what works for you. Some paints thin differently to others, and another note on that is I would always use the correct thinner for the paint that you're using. So I like to use Tamiya paints in the main, so I use a Tamiya thinner. If you're using Vallejo paints, use Vallejo thinner. Just helps to get things started off when you're beginning out in the hobby, where you're beginning out with the airbrushing. Sometimes there's adverse reactions with different paints and different thinners because of the way they're formulated. So if in doubt, just use the manufacturer's thinner. But that's the sort of consistency of paint that you want. Let's turn to the workbench in a moment and we'll start working on the little London Road models. J3, is it J3? I can't even remember, I think it's a J3. We'll start working on this guy and we'll start to get him sprayed up. Right, we've moved now to the airbrushing table. We've got everything set up, ready to go. The compressor's on. I've set it to about just over 20 psi. That's a pretty good ballpark figure to start spraying with. And what we'll do is we'll get the colour cup loaded up with some paint. And for this, I'm using Tamiya XF1, which is flat black. And we'll go in and we'll load up the colour cup with some paint. Reasonable amount of paint in there. Let's wipe off the stirrer. I've been doing a little bit of experimenting now. To be honest with you, the first time I did this, I messed it up. And I wasn't going to show you that, but I thought I would. What I was getting was paint splatter. Now, that could be a combination of a couple of things. It could be that the nozzle on my airbrush is starting to go. in which case obviously I need to replace the nozzle and the needle at the same time. That can be a cause of splatter. The other thing it might have been was that the paint was slightly too thin. So that's another problem that you might get. So you need to do some experimenting, and actually what I had to do eventually was cut the model right back down to the bare the bare metal, strip it all down with cellulose thinners. Messy job, but I've now re-primed it all and it's now ready to go. So I'm just adding some thinner now directly into the colour cup. It's Tamiya thinner, just a few drops into there like so. That should be enough, like that. Put the lid back on that one, and then also what I'm going to do is just add a very small amount of Johnson's Clear, which is a floor polish essentially. There we go, Johnson's Clear. It's a floor polish and it's just going to help the paint to settle down and lay out evenly. I'm not going to put much in there because it's gloss. I'm using a matte paint, but just a couple of little drops into there should just help the paint to settle down nicely when we lay it onto the model. Give it a stir. Now, it's probably really bad practice to do it like this directly into the colour cup, but who cares? Mix that up. And you can see there just on the spatula how that paint is running off. It's not too thick. It's not too thin. It's kind of translucent, but we don't want it to be too thin because otherwise it's going to be watery and it won't cover what we want it to cover. So it's important to get that paint consistency right. And as I say, that's generally a bit of trial and error. So now I'm just going to test the airbrush. 20 psi, as I say, is a good starting sort of figure. Just make sure that's coming through nicely. Seems to be now. I'm going to put the lid on the colour cup to stop it sloshing around. And we'll go in and start doing the model. So we don't want too much paint on this model overall. What we're looking to do is just do the inaccessible areas first. So just into all the corners and the nooks and crannies to begin with. Like so. And then we can run along the footplate as well. There we are. And we just, basically what we're doing here is just cutting the model in, so just like you would when you're painting a wall. That's going on very nicely now. So just a little bit of paint to begin with, then just gradually build it up. By working on the inaccessible parts of the model first, it means that when we do the main parts, we're not going to flood it all with paint and create huge build-ups of paint, which is really what we don't want. And the beauty of the dual action airbrush, of course, is that I can vary the amount of paint and air at the same time, ensuring that I get the right paint to air mixture and ensure that the model covers nicely. And the model's now really starting to take its character. Now I've got most of the areas cut in, I'm just going to double check once more to make sure that everything is painted quite well. See, I've missed the back of the steps there. And now we can start to fill in the rest of the model. I generally start spraying off the model, just in case there is any splatter from the airbrush. So there we have it. You can see there that we've achieved a really nice smooth finish on there just by laying that paint on slowly and steadily. We don't need to rush, there's no point in flooding it with paint, and you can achieve there a really lovely smooth paint finish. I'll now carry on with the tender and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. So there we have it then guys, that's airbrushing. I hope you found that useful. Airbrushing is one of those things I think that people struggle with, so that's something that we can do within our hobby that really enhances our models and gives us a great finish. I've actually finished the model now, pretty much in fact. It's done, as you can see here. I've deckled it and it just needs a light weathering now. I'm going to count that as one done for 2017. It's been a really nice build and I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it. Also been working on the LERC one. This is not something that you've seen. Let's just show you that one. There we are. I've been working on that this year as well. That's one of my private projects that I've been doing. I hope to get that one done. And of course I'll be working on that DJH A1. Now it's been so long since I did the last video, or the introduction for this video, sorry, that I've actually got shelving now, brand new shelving, which is absolutely brilliant. And what else has happened? Oh yeah, that's right, I said that I wanted double figure likes for that video. I actually got nearly 50 likes. I also said at the start of the video that I was on 130 subscribers. I'm now on 250 subscribers, so it's been absolutely fantastic. Considering I haven't even released a video in the last 3 months. The growth of the channel has been absolutely superb. So for something as niche as this, it's been really brilliant. So thank you so much for your support this year. 2018, I'm going to try and get a few more videos out. We'll be carrying on with that A1. That's one of the main builds, but also keeping up the tips and the modelling stuff, and also keep the questions coming in. We've had a few questions in the comments which I tried to respond to, and it's really fantastic if you get involved because it makes it an exciting and enjoyable community for all of us then. So enjoy your modelling for 2018. Why not make your New Year's resolution to build a kit? Have a go, buy a British kit, support the UK economy, and have a great time with your modelling, and I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.